Okay, hi everyone. It is a big day. It's Disability Pride Day, commemorating the 32nd anniversary of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I'm so excited to welcome you to our first ever Disability Tech Talk. I'm Jocelyn Cohen, Vice President of Communications and Engagement with Cerebral Palsy Alliance Research Foundation, or CPARF for short. This webinar is closed caption enabled, and I've turned on transcription. For additional accessibility, I'll share a visual description of myself. I'm a white woman with dark brown chin-length hair that's down and brown eyes. I'm wearing large blue-green glasses and a red and pink short-sleeved shirt. Sometimes I might look like my eyes are looking away from the screen or rolling, but that's part of my CP. So with CPARF's recent expansion into the innovation realm, we're shining a spotlight on technology that will make a difference for people with disabilities right now. And this series builds on our brand new podcast, Changing What's Possible, which focuses on affordable technology that transforms the way disabled people live our daily lives, making accessibility accessible. And to that end, today we're speaking with Keith Kirkland, the co-founder of WearWorks. He is a fashion and industrial designer with a background in mechanical engineering. And Keith has created different types of wearable devices, which have ultimately led him down the path to creating the Wayband, which we'll talk more about in a bit. I've had the pleasure of speaking with Keith several times before, and I'm thrilled that all of you will get to join in on the conversation today. As we're talking, please feel free to leave your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can. Welcome, Keith. Before we start, can you provide a visual description of yourself for our attendees, please?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Keith Kirkland. I'm a 42-year-old African-American male with shoulder-length dreadlocks, and I'm one of the co-founders at WearWorks.
Thank you, Keith. So I know a lot about WearWorks and the Wayband. I want to make sure that everyone that's here today can learn. So before we get into the details of that, what made you pursue wearable technologies in the first place? I know origin stories are important. They kind of show motivation for achievements.
Yeah, well, when we started WearWorks, and like me and my two co-founders, we came together and started the company. And so when we started the company, we each had very different reasons for wanting to do it. So speaking to my the main reason I was really interested in it was I had a background in fashion and basically engineering. I had lots of movement related injuries. I had two partially torn shoulders, cuffs, rotator cuffs.
Oh, goodness.
I injured my back and herniated a lower disc when I was flipping off of a scaffold. I picked up skateboarding on my 33rd birthday. And I had all these injuries associated with it. So my personal door in was I was trying to build help a person download an advanced form of movement like Kung Fu and teach it back to you safely using only vibration.
Okay, you broke up a little bit when you were speaking, but because I've spoken with you before, I think what you were saying was you were trying to build a suit to help with movement, and the specific type of movement you were thinking about was Kung Fu. And I think, I'm not sure if you covered this today, but I think it was you wanted to keep yourself moving because you knew that skateboarding would tear another rotator cuff or hurt you in a different way, and so you wanted to avoid that. What led from creating that Kung Fu suit to the Wayband? What was sort of the path to that?
Yeah, so after I finished, and let me know if I'm breaking up and I'm still not clear. Super happy to regurgitate.
Internet
or turn my
is
video off
fun.
if need to. Exactly. After I did the work around the suit and realized that it was feasible, the next piece was I was like, wow, I really would love to have this technology built. And so I was going to create a company by myself to set out and do that work. And then I met my co-founders. Well, I already knew them. They were friends of mine, but they approached me and they said, hey, we're about to go and create a haptics company. You've been doing haptics with this Kung Fu suit for a whole year. What if we all kind of joined forces and went at it together? And so when we thought about what our first product was, the Kung Fu suit just didn't really make sense. Like you have to do like 3-positional, space accuracy with millimeter,
lots of precision,
millisecond
and
latency. Yeah, exactly. It's like wirelessly multiple points all over the body. any of those challenges could have been a startup in and of themselves back in 2015. And so when we looked at like what we were going to do, it was actually my co-founder Kevin. He had met with a friend and our current advisor Marcus Engel. He's an author and a public speaker who's blind and visually impaired. And he came to the school. Kevin had invited him to talk about like accessibility for design in 2012, kind of like back before it was really a thing at the moment. And Marcus and them got connected, and he just talked about his challenges finding his way around Pratt's campus. Like we have this beautiful sculpture garden. It's one of the biggest sculpture gardens in New York City. But it's also like for a blind person who's never been there, very hard to navigate. And so when he talked about that challenges, he had a really strong concept that the work that he was doing in haptics could easily be applied to the navigation space. And like I think that the part that connected with me in that conversation was, wow, navigation is just a simpler form of movement than Kung Fu. Instead of three-dimensional space, it's two-dimensional. Instead of lots of points all over the body, you're one point, right? Instead of like, you can move in any direction, the whole language is go straight, turn left, turn right, wrong way, you've arrived. And I felt that like with this simpler subset of information, and we could figure out how to do this with haptics purely as an experience using only touch without the need for visual or audio references, then we had the possibility to make that faster, make it 3D space, and use it for more advanced forms of human movement. So for me, the personal draw was that navigation became like the testing ground for what eventually would be the entire movement system that we could build in the haptic space.
That's fantastic. And you've used the word haptic and haptics a lot. And I know that before I spoke with you, my only exposure to that word was something on my phone. I had no idea what it was. I just left it alone. Can you explain for everybody what haptics is?
Yeah, so haptic means touch, kind of like optics is for eyes, haptics is for skin. And so what we're doing as a haptics company is the same way that a graphic designer knows how to use color and design a poster in a way that draws your eye to pay attention to the elements that they deem are the most important, or more importantly, that their clients deem are the most important.
Right.
We see haptic design as a space where we use touch and knowledge of how the brain touch information, plus the wide and long history that human bodies have in touch memory existing in space, right? We've all been in a car and had that car stop suddenly, right? Now that's a vocabulary word that we can draw on because we've all had that similar experience. The same way we use red for stoplights because we know that red signifies danger, and that's what our eyes and brains are wired for. So we really see a really in-depth study of how to use the skin as a communication channel to deliver information in a more intuitive way. And we're just starting with navigation to, show the world what's possible and to prove the point.
I love hearing you talk about that because when you first explained it to me, I know that my mind was blown. And I think that the folks that are watching here today and that will watch this later on when it's on YouTube will definitely learn something just from your discussion of haptics and touch memory and how we can harness that moving forward to help everybody. So you just talked about haptics, but specifically, can you talk a little bit more about the Wayband and how the haptics within the Wayband work?
Yeah, happy to. And so the way the haptics and the Wayband work is we've invented this thing that we call the Haptic Corridor. Now, the Haptic Corridor is a 360-degree experience that lets you know when you're going in the right direction. So for visualization, if anyone's ever played Pac-Man or had a piece of pizza with a slice missing, right? That's kind of like the right way to go, that triangle. And everything else is essentially some varying degree of wrong. And what we've done is we've built a symmetrical experience that when you're going the right way, you feel absolutely nothing. And then the minute you turn about 20 to 45 degrees away from center, which is set by the user, you can make the corridor as wide or as narrow as you like. After that, you get a tiny vibration, and that vibration starts to get stronger the longer you turn until you're 180 degrees the wrong way. At that moment, we give you the most annoying vibration we can to let you know that you should stop. And then the idea is that like from either side, left or right, we don't need to tell you. It's kind of like a game of hot and cold. You know, like you're either going in the right direction or you're not. And when you get to that intersection, you collect a dot. We give you a tap tap to let you know, hey, you collected this dot. Now we're going to change it and point you at the next dot. And then dynamically, we point you at the dot that's a left-hand turn. Now you're facing the direction and you're moving wrong. So you turn to the right because you don't know which way to go, right? And you feel the vibration get heavier instantly, like, whoa, wrong way. And, you know, like you turn to the left, you feel it get lighter. All of a sudden you feel nothing. And, you know, like this is the space that you're allowed to walk into. And it was a term that people who were blind and visually impaired who were using our app, that's who we originally started it with and made it for. They would walk down the street and they would feel a vibration on the left and a vibration on the right. And they're like, hey, it feels like there's like a hallway protecting me, telling me which way to go. And we're like, wow, that's a fantastic reference. Let's use that.
I love that. I was thinking of it kind of like the bumpers in the bowling alley. Like it's going to keep the ball from going in the gutter, going to keep you on the path. But I like the hallway imagery a lot more. And I like as well that the visually impaired and blind community guided you with that language as you're moving forward with this. So, you know, you've mentioned that group, and what other groups of people have used Wayband so far? And can you tell us a bit about some feedback maybe that you got from people in addition to the hallway, so that people that are watching, listening, reading, hearing can understand kind of the breadth of experience so far?
Yeah, so firstly, we started working with the blind and visually impaired population. Our initial, we took our first prototypes to the National Federation of the Blind. And I remember when we were talking to them originally, we were like, because we were looking at the GPS, you know, navigation has challenges. Maps aren't always so well mapped depending on what city you're in. Sidewalks aren't so well mapped out. GPS is inaccurate. Those are all challenges that we have to deal with as a mapping company. And we thought that like, wow, you know what? Mapping will be better in a few years. What if we just like did something easier that didn't require mapping? And so we were looking at obstacle detection and avoidance as our initial product. And we took both the navigation prototypes and the obstacle detection prototypes to the National Federation of the Blind. And the first thing they told us is don't build a device for people who are blind and visually impaired. Like build a device that everybody can use that's optimized for the blind and visually impaired experience. And so to that end, they were like, it doesn't make sense to do this piece. Like this navigation part is actually really a problem that we have. If you can fix that, that will change things. And so that's kind of where we started. But knowing that the request from the very beginning was that it not be a blind only device, we started immediately looking at what other opportunities and groups could benefit from the Wayband's unique way of wayfinding. And so we've been working with the Helen Keller National Center for people who are deafblind. They don't have the audio option that a person who is blind or visually impaired has. And now for people who might not be aware around the blind space, audio navigation is an option and it is available, but when your ears or your eyes, talking in your ear is basically equivalent of like being able to see, but staring at a map while walking down the street. Like your eyes are blocked and you can't pay attention to what's going on around you. And so by offloading to the sense of touch, we free the ears for a person who's blind or visually impaired so that it can focus on spatial awareness, environmental cues, things you need to keep yourself safe when you're walking about. Right. Now in the blind, for the deafblind experience, that sound isn't an option. So for them, you know, they feel so connected to what we're doing because we're kind of like leading this charge around like, hey, we went to the digital communication era and we only took 2 senses of humanity with us. What about the other 3, right? And how do we bring touch, which is our focus, into that world? And so touch is their whole world. And so the deafblind community is like really, you know, we think that there are really, really strong possibilities from collaboration points of view in that particular space. And then that gave us immediate access to the deaf community as well, in the hearing impaired community. Because if you're hearing impaired, looking down at a map, like your eyes no longer have the capability of paying attention to the things that are going on around you. Right. And so without having that spatial information, if you could get that information through your skin, free your eyes, again, you keep yourself safe. And then we've also been talking to wheelchair users, both power and manual, The big challenge that wheelchair users had that presented to us, we were actually talking with the team at Airbnb, and one of the people on their accessibility team is a wheelchair user. And she was like, yeah, like I have to roll with my map on my leg and I'm scared I'm gonna like drop my phone or someone's gonna steal it and I can't catch them. And I was like, so she's like, I put it in between my legs so that I can like roll, but then I have to keep stopping every block or so to make sure I know where I'm going. And then more importantly, like oftentimes I can't navigate with curb cuts. So I'll get somewhere and there's no way up for me and I have to like double back and find my way around. And so we see an opportunity where as a wheelchair user, and you have a Wayband, either the phone is vibrating underneath of your leg if you have space and you can feel in your lower limbs, or you can have the Wayband on directly, and now you don't need to pull the phone out of your leg from the wheelchair. You can just get the information directly from the wrist, while you're rolling. So, and that piece kind of opened up to us from the wheelchair community after chatting with them. And then the final part that we've been looking at is the neurodivergent community. Specifically, we're looking at high functioning autism as a potential use case. We've had lots of conversations with people who have recommended that our product would be good for the autistic community. We've been in such development with the blind and visually impaired community that we haven't had a chance to really explore that in such a deep way yet. And so that's something that we're super excited to get the product out into the world and get into the hands of people, so that we can get a sense of like different people with different disabilities, how they're responding to the product, and how we might be able to tweak it to support all those groups.
I deeply appreciate everything you said, because a lot of times, just taking it back a step to a venue or a restaurant, for example, saying that they're accessible, something being accessible with the wheelchair insignia on it doesn't mean that it's accessible to all disabled people. They might throw that sign up there and mean, oh, we have a ramp that we might bring out that you could roll up, or you have to go around the back and go through where the garbage is, or whatever. But it's not necessarily going to be accessible to people with sensory disabilities or other types of disabilities. They're just kind of looking at one aspect of it, and a lot of times definitions and products are looking at one aspect of disability. And the thing that I love about Wayband and WearWorks and your philosophy is that you're really looking at all the different communities that could be served by your technology, and that you're open to adjusting it and taking the feedback to make it the best it can possibly be for those people. And that's a really powerful thing. As a disabled woman who's ambulatory with CP, I don't want to be walking around holding my phone. It's expensive. It has my life on it. And if I trip and fall and drop it, or someone takes it out of my hand, that's not ideal. So having something on my wrist to vibrate and tell me I'm walking in the wrong direction, or not vibrate and show me that I'm walking in the right one, is fantastic. Because I don't want to have to memorize directions. And with CP, and likely with other types of neurological disabilities where you're navigating through the world, you take in so much stimuli and you're dealing with a lot of obstacles that wouldn't necessarily be obstacles to someone who's non-disabled. So, watching all the people on the sidewalk on their cell phones with their dog leashes, with their bags hanging low that could like joust you in your cap. So you're listening to hear if those silent electric bikes are coming up behind you, or if a delivery person is coming up behind you on their bike on the sidewalk. You're watching everywhere, both up and down, looking to make sure you don't trip, but also looking to make sure you don't walk into a person. And so when you were talking about how when a visually impaired user or a deaf or hearing impaired user has a sense that they rely more on another sense. And then when you're occupying that sense with navigation, that sense is taken away. That really resonated with me. And I think my guess is that it resonates with the people here today and the people that will be watching this. So thank you for sharing all of that and for really embracing whether or not you meant it to be this universal design. A lot of times the things that are created for one type of disability or disability in general are helpful for the public at large. Obviously we're speaking about this in a disability context, but have you thought about this as well, just in the non-disabled context too, for directionally challenged folks or just people visiting new places?
Yeah, definitely. And, so one of the things, and, thank you for that. That was like a super beautiful sentiment. Thank you so much for sharing. Like one of the things that, if I take my AirPods out right now and I put them in my mouth, like they don't work. Like if I take my glasses and I put them in my ears, they do nothing, right? Like I take my Wayband and I don't have an arm, so I put it on my left arm, it still works. Like I don't have any arms, I wrap it around my ankle, it still works. I don't have legs, I put it in a neck brace or a headband, because there's just so much more skin. And like we tapped into like more people just have access to touch information. But from a design point of view, basically we've done almost nothing with it. We've designed one word in the haptic community, hey. That's what your phone tells you. It's like, it doesn't tell you any information other than, hey, right? And so we're like, wow, if I were to kiss you or to punch you in the face instantaneously, you would have a whole lot of information. How do we tap into that ability, that volume of information that's accessible in an instant to like do other more important things with? And so that's where we're really looking at it from the haptic landscape side of things. So I just wanted to kind of drop that piece in there. From the point of view of reality and, like dealing with the masses as a generality, and one of the biggest challenges that we saw with technology in the disability space is that it's ridiculously expensive. Like we were buying stuff that was like, we could make this with $100 worth of components off the shelf. Like, why did it cost $800? And a big part of that model is because, and nothing personal against like assistive technology companies, but at the end of the day, you have a very small market, you have research and development costs, and you need to like get your money back so that you have a sustainable business so that you can keep doing your work, right? But if you're only focused on a piece of the market that is really small, the opportunity for economies of scale don't really exist there. And so not only do the people who need it not have access to a lot of it, they have to pay a lot more for it, right? And so the mass population for us is the way that we get accessible technology affordable, like accessible, right? It's like, and most people will say like, hey, what's the most, for most people who are blind at least, like we ask them like, what are the most, user-friendly pieces of assistive technology that you have? And it's like, hey, my phone and my Bluetooth headset, and it's just like the same things that everybody uses because they don't have stigmas. And also too, because they have a lot of capability built around it. So what we're looking at from the, like sighted visual typical use cases is we're really looking at traveling in new places. I'm currently right now in Romania and Bucharest. I can't read Romanian. Like the design of like communist neighborhoods from the 70s is not necessarily like very well urban planned. And like every time I go visit a friend's house, I've been there 20 times, there's no way I can find their door without a map, right? So it's like, what is your experience when you're traveling in a new place? Especially like we had conversations with women who travel alone, and they were just talking about like the attention that they get looking like they're lost, right? The Wayband is a discrete piece of technology that lives on your wrist. All the vibrations come to you silently. The person sitting next to you has no idea what your Wayband is telling you to do. Right. So automatically there's a sense of confidence that you can move in a way that you know where you're going and you don't look like the target, maybe in a city where the average income like might be less, per month than like what your cell phone costs, so, like, and not making yourself a lost target and putting yourself into that kind of like risky scenario. But then we've also looked at scenarios with athletes. And I think, initially we helped the first person who was blind run 15 miles of the New York City Marathon without sighted assistance. And so our world in athletics has always been really, really connected. And, we work with several Paralympian athletes who are testing with the Wayband, who see opportunities for it from the point of view of training and also too from a point of view of performance. So we're looking at like hikers, cyclists, snowboarders, skiers, eventually driving as well. Anything where you need your eyes to be paying attention to what it is that you're doing, but you also need to cover vast amounts of geographical distance.
Right.
Oftentimes not in a straight line. That's kind of like what we look to serve.
Yeah. Again, just even broader than I thought coming into this conversation, and I knew it was broad to begin with. When you brought up the idea of women in a foreign country and wanting to look like we know where we're going, I mean, that applies here too. So that's that's just another thing that I didn't think of even when I was looking at it through an expansive lens. So just, I appreciate that angle as well. And as a disabled woman who's visibly disabled, I really do want to look like I know where I'm going, because I know I'm already a potential target because I don't look like I can run away. So that is just another reason that this technology is really important for so many different demographics. So appreciate you sharing that as well. So we had a few questions come in when folks signed up for the webinar, and you sort of touched on this, but not completely, so I'll ask it. Someone asked, why should sighted people prioritize touch and haptics over AV when it comes to GPS? What makes it better or different? So, you were sort of talking about it. I'm kind of thinking in the car context rather than the walking, and you alluded to the car piece of it a little bit at the end of the last thing you were talking about. So can you expand on that some?
Yeah, so the benefit is that, if you think about it, if you're driving and you look at your phone, you get a ticket for reading text messages, right? But you somehow magically don't get a ticket when you spend that same amount of time looking at a map, right? And the reason is because how else do you get to where you're going? It'd be silly, right? And so what we're looking at really is that a lot of the practices that we've adapted around visual-based navigation aren't actually safe. They were just the only way we could do it. Like, it doesn't make sense to take your eyes off of a road for 60 to 100 feet at a time, and then, look at this map and then pop back up, right? It makes sense for you to get that map information in some other format so that your eyes really stay focused on what it is that you're doing. It's a safety thing, it's a priority thing. And the bigger part that we were trying to really convey is I remember the first time in 2016, we went to South by Southwest. We were invited down there, first showcase of our technology to the public at large. And so we're super excited, of course, when we get down there. And, I spend more time looking at Google Maps than I did at Austin.
Wow.
Because that's how much I was on my phone. I was constantly looking down here. I was seeing the digital versions of all the buildings, but I wasn't actually seeing Austin. I wasn't seeing the people. I wasn't seeing the city that I was paying to be in. I was seeing the digital map version of it. And, a big part of the reason of why we got into this was how do we get people out of their phones and back into the real world? It's such a disconnection when you have to look at your phone for the device. And at the end of the day, there's only so much information that we can communicate visually and audially. Everything is fighting for your visual and audio attention because those are the only two channels digitally that you have to access. But we opened up the entire skin, it'd be opening up a new highway that some of that visual and audio information can be offloaded into other parts of the body that make more sense for that type of communication, freeing the eyes and ears to focus on the things that they do best and are most critical for the operation. And so we really see a holistic approach from a point of view of detaching from the device. We really see this idea of intuiting information in a new way, directly into your bodies. When we get sick, I don't know that I have this condition. I know hey, my lungs feel congested. I'm having a hard time breathing. I'm feeling a bit tired and I don't have an appetite. These are all feelings that then explore us, that give us enough information that then get us to go deeper.
Right.
To figure out, go to the doctor and figure out exactly what's wrong with us, right? So we don't need this these massive amounts of information kind of all at once. We really just need to be able to intuit some information on a grander scale and then focus in on the parts that we need to focus in on with the more visual and audio expansions of that. And so we really see the opportunity, is, right now you can go to school and study graphic design, music theory, or culinary arts. From a touch point of view, basically massage therapy, maybe, right? Physical therapy might be a close replica. So my dream is that like, why don't we understand touch as thoroughly as we understand sight and sound, especially when noted from actually orphanages in Romania at the turn of the 19th century, you know, like if you're not touched as a baby, you die. Like, so we have the most important sense. And from our point of view, we have no formalized education on how to expand, connect, use it in any kind of way. And we just see such a huge opportunity. And a big part of the Wayband and what we're doing is creating a platform that's going to ultimately allow everyone else the product that they need to build whatever haptic experiences that they want on top of it. We're just starting with navigation as the opening step.
I think it's fantastic because obviously people need to be able to get where they want to go, and the more independently you can do it without having to rely on other, you know, devices taking your attention away, the better. And as you were talking, it also just made me think about folks with sensory disabilities and the way that people in those situations process touch. I feel like that's a whole other landscape that you could dive into, and get a focus group of people that are highly sensitive to touch, because that's a pretty wide swath of people. So there's just a whole universe around you, and I love that you and your team are looking to explore it in all kinds of ways, and that navigation is just the start. So do you have a specific idea of what's next for WearWorks? You've talked about it a little bit, but is there anything specific that you're open to sharing in this forum, or are you really laser focused on the Wayband right now?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, like as a startup, definitely laser focused on the Wayband and delivery. And so the app is in the App Store right now. It's only open in the United States, but anyone in the United States can go in, download it, take it for a spin. The phone will vibrate in your hand and let you try out the technology without necessarily having to purchase the Wayband directly. And also too, it made it so that we can offer a super affordable price point so that, you know, no one needed subsidies or insurances to get it at $99 for the year. The other piece that we're working on next is delivering of the actual Waybands, which we're super excited about. We're delivering our first batch of 1,000 in September. And so all of our pre-order customers who have been waiting for such a long time, we're finally ready to deliver. And that part of it is like super great. And then from a product expansion point after that, one of the opportunities that we saw really was in the existing smartwatch market. For us, we built the Wayband because the haptics that were built on most devices at the time had such limitations on them that for us as a haptics company, basically, you know, giving us access to play 6 haptics was like Beethoven playing with like one arm and half a piano. And so we built our own device so that we could build whatever we wanted, right? But we see the proliferation of smartwatches over the last 5 years since we started the company. Right. And we see now an opportunity to build in a Wayband experience into existing smartwatches. So one of the biggest pieces that we're working on is an Apple Watch integration. And ideally, fingers crossed, we're hoping to have that ready to go by launch as well, so that we launch with a 3-product ecosystem of you can purchase the Wayband app by itself for $9.99 a month or $99 for the year. You pay $249, you get the Wayband and get the Wayband app with a 1-year subscription included, or you know, you pay an additional $3 on top of your subscription and you can use the Wayband, your Apple Watch with the Wayband app. So that's kind of like the big piece that we're running, just getting everything ready for launch. And then from a forward view and projections, the big thing is opening up the SDK. Like our goal initially was, we were like, hey, let's build a haptic device that like lets people make things haptically super easy. And then we realized that like no one knew what the word haptic meant. Right. So we're like, all right, of course, we should build something. Exactly. Like we should build something as an example, right? And you look at what Apple did when they came out with the iPhone, like Safari, Messenger, phone, they were apps. They were examples of what could be done. And for us, we hope that the Wayband is the example of what can be done. And then we want to tear that loose and open it up to like the developer, research, and creative communities, because we looked at where research dollars have been spent over the last 100 years, and you look at the five senses, you know, basically like look around your room and you can see where all the money went. It all went to vision, you know what I'm saying? Like much less of it went to sound, but like a lot went to sound, much less went to touch, but still a lot. And smell and taste were basically like negligible.
Right.
And so most of the devices around you, 7 screens in your room, 5 of them have speakers, but 4 of them have haptic motors in them already. And so we are already at a space where we have ubiquitous haptic proliferation in products in the market. Now we just need to make them do something more than just say, hey. And I think that that's like a wonderful opportunity to open up to the world.
It's harnessing what's already there and giving it the language to make it more useful to everybody. And I think that you and your team really serve as a model, like I said earlier, for universal design, kind of almost backing into something that makes the world more accessible for the millions and millions of people with disabilities. I think it actually might be 1 billion, and I should know that on Disability Pride Day, but it's some incredibly large amount of people in the world have disabilities, and it seems like the Wayband and haptic technology can help us all in different ways, even by doing the same thing. It will give us the same thing, but it's helping us in different ways and letting us reapply our attention in different ways. To that end, someone dropped something in the Q&A and said that using a Wayband in the car would also decrease rear ending. Does it help you with the spatial relation of where you are, so that you either on the road or walking on the sidewalk, which I call street for your feet, that you're not gonna rear end the person in front of you? I've definitely been rear ended by people behind me. It's not ideal with CP, so.
Yeah, so actually, unfortunately, no. Like we do nothing in the space around like obstacle detection and avoidance.
Okay.
And so when we were looking at the challenge, we were looking at navigation, and it's actually a twofold challenge. There's macro scale navigation, which is like, where's the post office? And then there's the micro scale of like, how do I avoid all the potholes, fire hydrants, cars, and dogs on the way to the, you know, place of destination. So we intentionally stayed away from the obstacle avoidance side of things. So we cannot actually detect anything around like obstacles in position and in space. But one of the things that, you know, from the Wayband app and its functionality, but from the things that we're opening up for developers to be able to do, essentially any data that you can transmit digitally, you can figure out how to turn that into a haptic output that kind of makes sense based off of the context of data that you're trying to put into it. So it's like, I could take the sound levels in this room and make a haptic design for that. I could take the light levels in the room. I could take the radiation, number of Wi-Fi signals. I could take the number of comets passing next to Mercury on Tuesday and turn that into a haptic signal if I had a data input stream that told me the number of comets that happen to be passing next to Mercury on Tuesday, right? And so when you see we started with the GPS as our input data stream, but this is totally open to take other input data streams as well and transfer that information directly through haptics. And the part that we want to own and the space that we want to control is like, we want to be the platform that makes haptic creation as easy as it is in Photoshop to like make an image with Adobe, you know?
You want to bring it to the masses, and it takes a long time to do that, but you're well on your way. Before we close out for the day, is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience about WearWorks or Wayband?
Yeah, so first thing I'd like to do is say that we have, if you go to our link tree at www.linktr.ee/WearWorks, we have a free 2-month code for anyone in the United States. They can download the Wayband app. Actually, it's technically 3 months because you get 1 month for free also included. So you'll get 3 months to use the Wayband app for free. And the big piece that we're really focused on right now is like, we really just want the community's like input on like how it feels, how does it work? Is it really intuitive? Does it make sense? And so we'd love for anyone to go try it out, get a sense of how well it's useful to you, and feel free to communicate with us directly. If you have any challenges, like one of the things I think that we've been really great at as a team is that when we first started the company, you know, like no one on our team had a disability. So like the way we learned how to design for people with disabilities is that we just listened and we did what they told us. You know what I'm saying? So like tell us some stuff that we need to do and like we make sure it gets done. And I think that relationship is kind of like how we've been able to kind of like progress with technology so forward and so quickly and so authentically, which I think is the most important part of all of this.
That's a really good tie-in to Nothing About Us Without Us, which is the big slogan of the disability community. You're really living that in the work that you're doing. Is the link tree in the Instagram bio for your company?
It is,
So
yes.
I would say head on over to Instagram and click the link tree because that'll be sitting there to take advantage of Keith and WearWorks' generous offer. So I just wanted to thank you, Keith, for sharing all of that, for sharing the really rich history and interesting evolution of WearWorks and where it's been and where it's going. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And you can learn more about WearWorks and the Wayband at wear.works. And you can learn more about disability tech startups like WearWorks that are changing the world by listening to CPARF's podcast called Changing What's Possible on your favorite podcast platform. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation and that you enjoy the rest of your day or evening, wherever you may be.
Cheers, everybody.
Take care. Bye.